What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. My review of The Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 4, Chapter 12, The Siege. Did I get them all? Alright, so I know last week I said that if this episode was like 25 minutes long, I was going to freak out. Well, I'm not freaking out. But with episodes ranging from 54 minutes to 41 minutes, 35 minutes to 39 minutes, they should have renamed this show the Randolorian. Let's move on. So we start the episode with a toy commercial. It's a 1 minute and 40-second scene with Baby Yoda in a crawl space with, two wires that are, live, which is what you do with a toddler. We're going to put a little asterisk on this scene and come back to it. Then Mando says, listen, I don't think we're going to make it with, the Mon Calamari Fix-It kid on the ship, so I think we need to swing by Nepharo and see some old friends. Cut back to Nepharo, and we have this 2.5-minute scene of Cara Dune being a badass. She's evidently the new marshal, and she's going to clean up this town. She beats up some bad guys and rescues, from what we see in the concept art, is actually a fire-breathing ferret. But they cut that out of the episode for some reason. Why? I remember this is a 2.5-minute scene that we're going to put an asterisk on it. Cut back to it. Then after the title card, we have Mando coming in for a landing, and he just lands. He doesn't comically flip over in the water. He just lands, which is the way that it should be. And then we have a reunion with two great characters from last season, Cara Dune and M. Bison. Mando is hoping his credit's still good. Maybe Grief Karga can hook him up with a few repairs. He's like, listen, no problem. I'll get some guys right on it. And then he turns to two mechanics that are just there, outside the city limits, just working on like a box. I think that maybe instead of having two mechanics just sort of standing there, he could have radioed back to a hangar and said, hey, come pick up the Razor Crest and tow it back to the shop and fix it up. It's a minor gripe, but it kind of bothered me. So then we take a walk through town and we see that Cara Dune has indeed cleaned up the mean streets of Nepharo, which is a little bit of a disappointment. Part of the appeal of this series, for me anyway, was the gritty, dirty sort of underground of Star Wars. And, as we see later on in the episode, even the stormtroopers, it looks like they've been sort of cleaned up with a fresh coat of paint. I like the rugged, worn look of the stormtroopers in the first season. So we're walking through town and we see that even the bar has been retrofitted as a school, which, okay. So in this little school, we see that there's actually a class going on, and there's a droid teaching, and Greef says, hey, listen, let's just leave the child here and go talk business. This was a little weird for me. I know the child is 50 years old, but this is a class of 10-year-olds, 8-year-olds, and they were having a class with a curriculum and, data pads that they were studying and writing notes on. And this is a child that can't even speak. And then we get another 1.5-minute scene of toy commercial where Baby Yoda uses the Force to steal cookies from the kid next to him. Let's put an asterisk on this scene and come back to it. And now we see that Mithril, the blue guy from the first season, the first episode of the first season, is actually back and he's paying off his debt to Grief Karga. Didn't know that he owed him anything, but okay, it's kind of nice to see this character back. And now Cara and Grief lay it on Mando that, listen, there's an old Imperial base and we need your help to take it out. And they say they want to get rid of the Imperials because they want this to be a legit shipping port or location for the New Republic. And I like how we're world building here. So after viewing the location on a hologram, they jump in the speeder and go check out the site. And I thought, okay, well, maybe we're going to scout the site and then we're going to come back tomorrow. We're going to start the mission some other time. But no, they're going to do the mission now. They're sort of talking about their plan as they're driving up to the front door. Okay. Now, there is a small line of dialogue that could maybe justify all this. Grief Karga says that it's mostly abandoned, so they're going in under the assumption that there's a few Imperials, but not many, so I'll give it a pass, but that's not the way I would have done it. So Mithril's driving the speeder, and he drops off Cara and Grief and Mando and says, hey, I'll see you later, just call me when you need me. And, of course, Grief's like, oh, no, get out of the speeder and come help us out. Open this door that wasn't lava-rated on a lava planet. Okay. Once again, I didn't think the Imperials were this stupid. It seemed like when they ordered the door lock mechanism, they would check to see if it was lava rated. Maybe swing over by Mustafar and see what they're using. So while they're working on the door, Mando jets up to the platform and takes out a stormtrooper, opens up the door from his location. So Grief and Cara get on the elevator, and then they demand that Mithril goes with them, which is weird because he's really cowardly and doesn't want to go. So why would you drag him into a situation where he could be a liability? Now, earlier in this episode, we find out that his crime was that he was a bad accountant or a shady accountant. He was hiding numbers and stealing money. But I think if they would have made him a slicer, a hacker, and that was his crime, then he would actually have some use to them in this mission. And there would be a reason to force him to go with them and drag him into the situation. Because as it stands, it doesn't make any sense. Now, once they enter the facility, they take out an Imperial officer and they steal his code cylinder, which is where I think that this would not be necessary if Mithril was a hacker. You wouldn't need this MacGuffin or plot device. We have to have this cylinder because they use this code cylinder to open the door to get to the reactor room, and then they actually use it on the reactor to bypass the coolant lines. Once again, you could tidy this up if you just make Mithril a hacker. Hey, at gunpoint, if necessary, they force him to help them, and that would make more sense than once again, why is this guy here? And once we're in the reactor room, we have a nice little nod to the fact that within the Star Wars universe, there's no regard for safety and there's never a handrail on anything. So I like what you did there. So now they basically initiated a self-destruct sequence. They've got to get out of the base before the reactor explodes. And as they're leaving the facility, they take out a few stormtroopers, and then they come into a lab, and they have to take out the technicians that are there. And this is where we have, I guess, a big revelation as far as revelations go within the sequel trilogy. We find out that the child is Snoke. There's these giant test tubes on the wall, and you can see these figures that are kind of mangled. It looked like that scene from Aliens 4 where you had all those reject Sigourney Weavers, the ones that didn't quite work out. And then Mithril was able to jump on the terminal that was shot up in the firefight and access a recording that they play. And then we see that that's the young scientist from the first season, explaining in a message to Moff Gideon that we used all the blood we have from the child. These subjects didn't really take it so well, and we need more blood from the child. How did Mithril access this in the terminal? Once again, if you made him a slicer, this would make sense. He's the tech guy. He's the one that's hacking into everything because nobody else on the team is really a hacker. Everybody else is soldiers, so it would really make sense. That's a small story detail that could have tidied all this up. So once they realize that Moff Gideon is still alive and he is still very much interested in the child, Mando's like, I gotta run, I gotta protect the kid. So the team splits up. Mando gets out of the facility fairly quickly and then jets off to go take care of the child. And then you got Cara and Greef and Mithril, and they are trying to escape the facility. And they're doing a pretty damn good job. Yeah, until they get to that landing platform, they take out 11 stormtroopers. But then when they get to the landing platform, they're trapped in a firefight with 2 stormtroopers. What? I think in this scene you could have just not had the 2 stormtroopers, or maybe they just blow away the stormtroopers like they did everybody else, and then they could just jump into that armored speeder and take off. But once they do get into the armored speeder and they take off and the chase begins, that's when this episode gets really good. So as they're getting away in that armored speeder, you got speeder bike troopers take off after, and this is where it gets really cool. You can see the production value on the screen, and it's awesome. They're making their way down the hill. A couple guys make a wrong turn, and they go sideways, and they crash. And then you have a couple more that make it through that explosion, and they just really, once they get on the ground level, they just take off. And all the action in the chase scene is done really well. The speeder bike troopers catch up to them, and they take them out one by one. And we have this cool shot of the reactor actually overloading, and you see it erupt, and there's lava coming out of the base, and TIE fighters lift off, and then they join the chase. And Greef is on the main gun of that speeder, and he's doing the best that he can, taking out TIE fighters. He takes out one TIE fighter, and within that crash, the TIE fighter crashes into the armored personnel carrier, taking out the gun. And now, to make matters worse, they're out of the little ravine they're in, and now it's just open terrain. They're kind of sitting ducks. And just when you think all hope is lost, the Razor Crest comes in out of nowhere, taking out one of the TIE fighters. And then he has this really cool scene where he's engaging the second TIE fighter, and they're climbing, and the child's in the back, still eating the blue Oreos. Okay. And then he climbs, and he takes out that TIE fighter, and then he swings the ass into the ship around and comes back down, and then plays chicken with the other TIE fighter and takes it out. And, I mean, the way this was shot, it looked great. The action played well, and he doesn't even land to meet back up with Greef. Now we know that Moff Gideon is still alive and well, and he's after the child, and he's like, listen, gotta roll. Then we have a scene with an X-Wing pilot that's sort of taking their statement. So I don't know why he's patrolling the area. Were they looking specifically for the Razor Crest? Because we just had 2 episodes ago 2 X-Wings that had the Razor Crest in their sights, or could have arrested them, but they didn't. So maybe this is just a random patrol. Maybe, all the commotion, the fact that the base was, blew up, the fact that they had TIE fighters in the area, maybe that was what alerted him to this position. But I'm not sure why he's there. But for whatever reason, Greef isn't giving him any information. And so this X-Wing pilot walks outside, and he has kind of a weird exchange with Cara Dune. He's looking at his data pad. And he's like, it says here you're an awesome warrior. You should join us. And she's like, well, I'm not really a joiner. I did that once before. It didn't work out so well. And he says, oh, well, it says here you're also from Alderaan. Did you lose anyone? Hey, bro, the whole planet exploded. So, of course, she responds with, I lost everyone. Because the planet blew up. And then he's like, yeah, I served during Alderaan, which you served during all. Wouldn't you say like the Battle of Alderaan? Or I served during that time, or I was a rebel at that time. And he says, I'm sorry for your loss, which is like, thanks. And the very last scene is aboard a Star Destroyer-ish sort of ship. And we find out that one of those mechanics who worked on the Razor Crest planted a tracking device on it. So that's interesting. And then the officer that found this out takes this information to Moff Gideon. He likes this information. He's like, okay, well, we will be ready. And then the camera sort of backs away, and he's in this room with what looks like these stalls or these chambers. I don't know what these are. This looks like one of the characters we maybe saw in one of the games. It kind of reminded me of some of those tall troopers that we saw in the Force Unleashed games. I'm not sure if that's exactly who that is, but it looks really interesting. And, of course, they don't do anything. They're just sort of motionless. And the camera moves back, and we see that there's 20 of these things. So not sure what that means, but, it could mean that the action will continue for the next episode. All right, so let's go back to some of those scenes that I put an asterisk by. If they're concerned with the length of the episode, which it doesn't appear that they are, but let's say they had, for whatever reason, to stay within that 30-minute time frame or 39-minute time frame. I think you could totally cut out the whole blue wire, red wire thing, get rid of that. I know everybody loves Baby Yoda, and I know you... Okay, let's say you got to have one of those scenes per episode. That's fine. It's probably still too much, but if you want a scene, then just have one. You don't have three. You don't have the red and the blue wire. You don't have him sitting in class stealing Oreos. And you don't have the very end where, oh, Baby Yoda spit up. You're overdoing it with Baby Yoda. I think they really should have stretched out his time on Nepharo. It doesn't necessarily have to be more than one episode, but it needs to be stretched out. I mean, day one should have been Mando lands. He sees what they're up to. He turns the Razor Crest over these mechanics. They talk about this Imperial base they want to take out. They even go scout the site. And then they say, all right, in the morning we will attack. Or in the morning we'll do this mission. So then that next morning you have a scene where we put Baby Yoda, I don't know, in a daycare, something a little more age appropriate. You won't have to have the scene where he's taking Oreos from kids. Then everyone attacks the base. They get captured. And during their captivity, they find out about the lab, the experimentation, and everything. So then the next morning, when they break out, they can go right to the reactor, destroy the reactor or overload the reactor. And then Mando's like, listen, I've helped you do the reactor, but I got to get the hell out of here and save the child. And then everything could have played out the same way. But now we've had 3 days go by instead of one. So it would make more sense the Razor Crest would be, which the Razor Crest looked great at the end of the episode. But remember, there was nets and rope holding it together, what essentially was just a few hours prior. Because I know this is Star Wars, but it seemed like the Razor Crest got fixed really quickly. So the main problem for me in this episode is not so much time management, but time allocation. We're spending too much time on Baby Yoda and not enough time on things that actually pertain to the story and make it a little more fleshed out, a little more believable. And I think as this season goes on, we're going to find that episodes 2 and 3 are going to be a real problem for the flow of the entire season. I think you could have taken episode 2 and 3 and sort of pushed those together and made one episode very easily. All right, now it's time to rate this episode. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Time allocation problems aside, this was a great episode for the action. Visual effects were stunning, and I think for the most part we had a good, tight, self-contained story where we had a beginning, a middle, and end. We accomplished something, and then we moved on to the next objective within the season. And that's the way these episodes should be constructed. But for the most part, I think you got a very good episode. I think this is a return to form. Now, what happens next week is anybody's guess. All right, those are my thoughts, but let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Y'all have a blessed day, and I will see you next time.